good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are. Thanks for jumping on to this webinar and online training workshop. Excellent. I can see some attendees rolling in and a few more joining. So I think what we might do is we'll kick into it, and anyone joining late can pick up, or they can see the recording that we'll share after this. So my name's Andy Hovey. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Starboard, and with me today is Kelly, the Chief Marketing Officer. We're going to talk about, frankly, a bunch of new work that we've released and some work that's on the way, which will help you with risk assessing vessels and investigating them through a variety of different means. There's kind of three buckets of things that we're going to talk about today. One is the integration of the S&P Global Market Intelligence company information. This is the first release in this area of what will be a number of releases. We're going to talk about some new algorithms that we've released related to transshipments and inferred transshipments, and some information about the risk indicators release, which is coming very soon. And then we'll sort of quickly cover a bunch of new features that have been released in some filtering and an activity screen and some improvements to the vessel list. So I'm going to hand over to Kelly to kick us off first of all and talk a little bit about some of these things.
Thanks, Andy. And as Andy mentioned, there's a bunch of things to get through. So I'll kick straight into the demo. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was the new time filter. So up here, we've got a new option, which is for 2 hours. So this is really different than the other filters in that instead of having the show more or show up-to-date data button in the bottom right-hand corner, this is always up-to-date. And you can see in the bottom left here when it was last updated. And this is really good for when you're looking at really big areas like I've got on screen at the moment, or when you're looking, or maybe you've got Starboard up on an operational screen, so you don't want to have to keep refreshing it, and it will always be the real-time data. So the other thing I wanted to talk about, obviously I've got a lot of vessels on screen at the moment, and there is the option to filter by area and the usual advanced filters as well. What's new under areas is here I've got my standard pinned areas, but now you can search for any EEZ in the world. So for example, even though it wasn't necessarily in my organization, I wanted to look up Kiribati, I can add that EEZ in there. And then once you do add that, that will be pinned to your areas, and you can manage that here as well. So you can manage which areas you can easily see at the top of your list. So what I want to do now, though, to filter down to a few more vessels of interest rather than all of these, and I can see a few screens haven't loaded, so I'm just going to load those quickly. There's obviously a lot of vessels in this area. So I'm going to go through and just select a tag. So on the left here, I've got a tag looking at the Dongwon fleet. So this is something Andy's going to talk a bit more about later. So if I select those vessels, it's going to start filtering to those vessels that have been tagged. And I actually tagged this earlier with that fleet. And I can see there's a few fishing vessels in the fleet and a few that are not fishing vessels. It looks like those are fish carriers on screen at the moment. And I'm actually going to pick this particular fish carrier that's in port at the moment. And I'm just going to extend the journey summary for this vessel. So looking back from when it was last in port to where it is now. And that's going to bring up a couple of these new events that Andy mentioned that we want to talk about today. So we've got likely transshipments and also inferred transshipments. So I'll talk about the likely transshipments first. So I'm just going to zoom in to this area here. And what you'll see is a little bit different than previously with encounters, where we had the lighter shade of red on this icon. We've now got a darker shade of red, but still the solid double arrow. So that's showing that there's a likely transshipment here. And I'm just going to click on that. And the same with encounters, it's going to bring that information up on the left, like we previously had with encounters. but it will show you that it's a likely transshipment. And the reason we've flagged this encounter as that is the length of the transshipment is one of the considerations. So this has been over an hour for the encounter, but also really importantly, the two vessels that were involved. So we've got a fish carrier and a long liner here. So we can be reasonably confident that given the length of this encounter and the vessels that were involved, that a transshipment of fish is occurring here. And the other thing that's worth mentioning for encounters is previously where you may have had multiple encounters between these two vessels, if there's two encounters in quick succession between the same two vessels, that'll all get combined now into one likely transshipment event. So you get the full information about how long that potential event has occurred. So I'm just going to deselect this fishing vessel now and go back to the Oceanus's track history. And I'm going to go have a look at this inferred transshipment. So one of the key things about this, and I've got a few filters so you wouldn't be able to see all the other vessels on screen, but if I was to click on this icon, you can see there's a dotted line there. And if I was to click on this icon, it doesn't bring up that other vessel because there is no other vessel there. So the only vessel reporting on AIS at the moment is the Oceanus. And we're inferring that based on its movements and its patterns, that what it's doing is a transshipment. So I'm also just going to turn on the oceanographic layer. And the reason I'm doing this is a lot of the algorithm is made up of the fact that it was safe for two vessels to potentially meet at sea at this point in time. So making sure that the wind wasn't too strong and the wave height wasn't too high, so that it was realistic that vessels would have been able to meet. And I'm also just going to bring up the help content as well, because there's quite a lot to this event. And within our help content, like with all the events, you can go have a look anytime to see how things are defined. So I'm just going to click here. And that's going to bring up the definition for how an inferred transshipment is defined. So some of the key things to point out, I'm just going to go over to the overview. So we can see that the wind during this event is below the threshold that's outlined here, so below 19.4 knots. We can also see that the wave height is under 2 meters, which is well below the threshold of 4. And we can see the vessel's speed, just scrolling through time as well, stays below that 3 knot speed. So based on all of those factors, it looks as though it would have been safe for these two vessels to meet. The other thing in terms of how this algorithm's been defined, there's a lot of conversations with experts to try and understand more about what would they see in terms of transshipment behavior, and also looking at the likely transshipment event as well. So being able to see what sorts of behavior are we expecting to see during a transshipment. And one of the key things that's come from that is, in this example, this vessel, the orientation of it, if you have a look, it stays very much on the same orientation throughout the event. And part of the reason for that is often we're seeing the vessels are favoring a particular side for the transshipment. So potentially the gear on board required to complete the transshipment is on one side of the vessel. So they stay in the same orientation. And also the larger vessel protecting the smaller vessel during that transshipment from the wind. So in this case, you can imagine that the fishing vessel is on the port side and this fish carrier is protecting it during that transshipment as it's moving along there. So I'm just going to close these now and turn off the oceanographic layer. I'm also going to remove these filters, and I'm going to look for other vessels that are in the area. And while that's loading, the reason I'm showing you this is there's a bit of a change within the measurement tools, which I wanted to show you, which is something I know will be a nice shortcut for a few users. So if I just zoom out, I'm just looking to see if there are any other vessels in the area that potentially were involved in this transshipment that maybe weren't reporting on AIS at the time. So if I bring up my measurement tools, here I can just line them up with when that event occurred And just imagine, for example, I thought, okay, perhaps this vessel here with some missing AIS might be one we can check the distance and how long it would have taken the vessel to travel from those two locations. But here now is the new option to change your distance and speed. So you can change that to your preferred metrics, and that'll just change in your account. That won't change for your whole organization. And also you can change the format of the coordinates, which I know is really useful for a lot of people, and that'll change everywhere. So in the downloads, on your AIS points, so everywhere that you've got that information, that will be updated. So that's most of what I wanted to cover. I guess really this is kind of showing an expansion of understanding those on-water networks, looking at our encounters, seeing how we are able to understand those relationships in more detail to know, this isn't just an encounter, it's a likely transshipment, or actually potentially there's other vessels there. And I'm just going to hand over to Andy now, who will talk more about understanding those off-water relationships. So looking at it from companies and understanding what those connections look like.
Great, thanks very much, Kelly. If anyone has any questions on any of that or anything that I'm going to say, just fire them through the Q&A section. As usual, we'll try and answer them either in the text, or we'll answer them as we go. And so, yeah, moving on from the algorithms, I'm looking at the same vessel that we were looking at in a high seas pocket of the WCPFC convention area. And I want to talk a little bit about the integration of the Standard & Poor's market intelligence, S&P's market intelligence companies information. So on the left-hand side, this will be familiar to you, but you'll see there's this new area here. We've got owner and operator, and then we've got a link to view all owners and managers. So if I view here, you'll get information about all of the different people involved in the management of this vessel, the registered owner who's looking after key details, owns the vessel, financing and insurance, the operator who's responsible for navigating the vessel and the journeys that it's on, and then the various responsibilities of crew and maintenance and upkeep between the ship manager, the technical manager, and then the compliance, document of compliance, who has the certificate for this class of vessel according to the SOLAS legislation. And in this case, all of these companies are the same company, but you can see that various different companies may be involved in the ownership, running, and financing of a vessel. Always at the bottom of this company information is when this information was last retrieved. In this case, it was the 17th of October, yesterday, and these vessel details are updated daily. If I click into one of these, this is where it starts getting really exciting, frankly. So now we can start to see all of the vessels that are involved with this company, but in the context of the map, and we can analyze them geospatially. So I can see that this vessel has a number of different roles with different vessels. I can see that there are 51 in the combined fleet, and 41 of those are matched in Starboard. And so sometimes a vessel is no longer in operation, but we hold on to some vessels that are not reporting on AIS for various reasons. And in some cases, there might be insufficient data to accurately match. But in most cases, any vessel with an IMO number is being matched in Starboard. I can see information about the flags that these vessels are flying. In this case here, you can see across the 41 vessels, there are a number of different flags. Some, South Korea, line up with essentially the beneficial owners of these vessels, and others, flags of convenience from other states. I can see that this is essentially a fishing company. There's a variety of fishing vessels and fish support vessels. And then I can also see this combined perspective of all of the information that I or my organization have added. So in this case, there's a bunch because we're looking at an internal testing organization. Obviously, we're not sharing any customer data in here, so your tags may vary, but you can see a lot of tags that I've added and we've added into this test organization. You can also see whether any vessels in the fleet have been previously IUU listed. In this case, there is one vessel that's been previously IUU listed, or whether any vessels are closely linked to those vessels, which we've covered in another webinar and is covered in our help center under the network analysis about how that works. What's also new, along with all of this company information, are these risk indicators here. So you can see here, we're combining the information from S&P, we're combining the information from the tags that the customer or you've entered, plus the global tags, and now we're combining a bunch of risk indicators that are looking across these 41 vessels. So I can see that 14 of these vessels have a history of visiting ports with a lower corruption perception index score. So this is a perceived measure of public sector corruption that comes from transparency.org. I can see that some of these vessels have likely high seas transshipments. I can see that 11 of these vessels have journeys with more than 90 days, and 4 of these vessels have a journey greater than 1 year. And some of these vessels hold a yellow card from the EU. The other information here is what you'll be familiar with today, is the Regional Fishery Management Organization. And then down below all of that is information again from S&P. So this includes company address and contact details, and again, when this information was last updated. And so we're really blending a number of different sources to give you a view of what you think of a vessel, a fleet, and a company, and then the company ownership and contact info information from S&P. If I click into the company report, I can see replicated what we were looking at, and then I can also look at the company structure. So in this case, I can see that there are some subsidiary companies, and then I can see the different country of registration across these companies. And any of these can be clicked into, and I'll see all of the same information for these companies. And at any time, I can go, who are all of the vessels that actually operated or owned, depending on which lens I'm looking at, by this company. And then I can see the risk indicators that have been applied by Starboard algorithms and processing, and then any tags that I've applied in my organization. Cool. And so this is kind of this company's release, and this information is available to everyone now. And what's coming very soon is the first version of these risk indicators. And where those risk indicators are going is heading in this direction. So the first version will be available as I've shown you in the application. They'll be on the left-hand side here, and they'll be on the vessel reports. But these risk indicators are expanding. So you'll be able to slice and dice the world by risk indicators, viewing those on the map with high, medium, low, or no, or risk indicators. And then you'll see them on the left-hand side, not just in the context of a fleet, but for all vessels that you're looking at. And this, like everything else in Starboard, will respond to the filters that you've got across the top. And you'll be able to use these risk indicators as part of that filter set. And so the first version will be looking at their previous IUU listing, the high seas transshipment we just covered, the EU flag carding decisions, looking at journey at sea. So a long time at sea over 2 years is considered a high risk indicator. And then we're going to be doing a bunch of work with the S&P data, looking at its identity. Are there mismatches between the company code and the flag? Is there an invalid MMSI number, or is the information being broadcast over AIS different to the information that's held on the IMO, or by the IMO rather? And so with this, and it's been amazing to see a growing number of tags that customers are using and a growing number of satellite data collections. There's just a lot going on in some customers' Starboard organizations. And so we're releasing a new activity feed, which is going to centralize all of these events happening across your organization. So here I'm looking on a development branch showing what's going to be coming very soon. I can see a couple of changes. One, the add filter button is moved over here. The other, the create alert button has come over here. But most importantly is there is a new tab across the top here. So if we look at Starboard, it's just mapped and tagged vessels. And I can see that there is a new activity tab at the top here. And so if I click into this, I can see that I've had a new alert just come in. 2 vessels have entered the WCPFC high seas pockets, which is something I had set up. It'll tell me any information about alerts, if any information has been added to a tag, or tags have been added to vessels. I can see the history of any previous notes, and then I can track this back through time. In this case, I'm looking at all activity, but I may only be interested in alerts, and these are the alerts relevant to me. Or I might be interested in tags and notes across the organization. What if people have been adding to vessels of interest? Or for example, I could just look at the data collections, which is all of the satellite data, which in this case has been added to a test organization. So this is great, especially when you're collaboratively planning, for example, a response or for an operation, so you can see all of the recent activity and information that have been added to your vessels of interest. That was kind of what I wanted to cover in the 2 kind of main areas. The first release of the standard and pause data, which is on the map and on the vessel reports, and then looking at what the first release of risk indicators will be, and then activity, which is coming very soon as a way to centralize all the key events. And there were a few other interface features and kind of analysis tools that I wanted to briefly touch on also. Kelly talked about the last 2 hours, which is great for operation center use. We looked at global EEZs, so these are available to everyone under the areas filter now. And there's a couple of other new filters and speed passports and a few improvements that we've made to the vessel list, and some more improvements on the way. So looking at speed, so what I'm looking at here, like every view in Starboard, responds to everything I have set across the top here. So I'm looking at the vessels in the Kiribati EEZ, all cargo, fish carrier vessels or fishing vessels of any variety. And now I can go into add filter, and under the vessel activity area, you can see that there was a new speed in area. And if you click into this, you can choose over, under, or between. In this case here, let's look at under 2 knots. We know, for example, in a security context, nations might be interested in vessels traveling under 2 knots in transit areas. For example, in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we're always very interested in vessels that travel under 2 knots traveling through the Cook Strait. And so now you can set this filter and look at just that behavior in an area. So if I go and do that, it goes away and looks at all of the points in all of the area that you have set. In this case here, I've come back with 99 vessels. I think before I had about 150 vessels. So 99 vessels have been in the Kiribati EEZ, traveled under 2 knots of this class. And so this is available to everyone today in Starboard. What I have here, because we have access to special and exciting development branches, is what's coming very soon to everyone is that I can choose to turn on speed for selected vessels. And so in this case here, if I hide all of the other vessels, I can see that this vessel is traveling at a fairly consistent speed. And if I move this vessel through time, I can see the speed on the left-hand side. And the reason this is interesting is this is consistent with the pattern that we had seen in the Sunflower 7 with the FAD deployment, which was a legal FAD deployment in the Sunflower 7's case. And so I can move this vessel through time and check that, but I can also intuitively see now from the speed on the track that the vessel speed is pretty consistent, as opposed to this point here where it drops right down. So speed filter is available today for everyone, and this speed on track filter is coming very soon. There's one other interesting aspect of this vessel here. One, you can see it moving around the Kiribati EEZ, but two, it travels straight up in a line here. So Kelly mentioned that you can manage these areas here, and this was the pinning and the unpinning area that she talked about. The other aspect of that release is that I can go into my layers panel, and then I can look at what areas are highlighted on the map, and I can have multiple areas highlighted on the map. So previously, the area that was highlighted on the map was the area that you're using for analysis. Now that you can have as many areas as you want highlighted on the map. In this case here, I want to turn on the WCPFC convention area, and I can see this is the black outline here. And so this vessel is carefully traveling outside the Kiribati EEZ and right in line with the boundary of the WCPFC convention area. So yeah, that's the new speed filter. The next thing we talked about at the top was some changes in passports filter and vessel lists. So we know that passports are critical in almost every realm of maritime domain awareness, particularly when you're looking in the security context and indeed the fisheries context, looking at arriving vessels and what sort of inspection processes you're going to conduct. Now you can work with passports with a different time frame to the vessels that you're looking at. So, for example, in this case here, I'm looking over the last month, 18th of September. I've stuck with the Kiribati EEZ, but I've said I want to know about any vessels, so vessels in the Kiribati EEZ over the last month, but show me any that have been to a port in Kiribati and a port in South Korea during the previous 90 days. And so now I'm starting to get a view of these vessels that are transiting back and forth between these ports. I can see the vessel down here that I had just highlighted with the speed on the tracks. Within this filter, you can build up really complex queries. So I've asked for passports during the previous 90 days, but I could have 7, 30, 90, or a year. In this instance, I want to know in all of the territories, but I could explicitly exclude by going not in any of the following territories or in any of them, so it can be an or as opposed to an and. And along with the passports filter, we've changed the way that the vessel list works a little bit. And so we've always had this journey since previous port. And then you can look at interesting activity that has happened since the last port of call. Now under here, you can go into number of alerts, and you can choose to only show me alerts, in this case for the Kiribati EEZ, because that's the area I have set. And so this is great if you want to keep a track of when vessels enter and exit an area. So one of the things that you can do when you set up alerts, and so this is under your notifications, not everyone wants to get an email alert, but a lot of people want to record the event that a vessel entered their area of interest. And so you can set up a notification, but choose to have it to email no one. And then that'll record the entry and exit events of your areas of interest. And so when you come here, they're recorded in the track history of vessels. And when you download those vessels for analysis, they're also there as well. And the last update that I wanted to share, so this is all currently available in your Starboard. You can work with the passports as I've shown. This vessel list works in your Starboard exactly as I'm showing here. What's coming very soon is an extension to this vessel list where we're telling you the answer essentially to when those port visits happened. And so just going back to the map, we're looking at the same query that I had before. I want to see all of these vessels that have gone between South Korea and Kiribati or had port visits in both of those places over the last 90 days. What's coming soon is it says when were the past port visits to those selected territories. So you can build these quite complex queries about historical port visits and get the answer straight away in the vessel list. Cool. So I think that was largely what we wanted to cover here today. So just to recap, we've released the first version of the S&P Global Market Intelligence company information that's available on the new company page. It's also on the vessel pages, and it's also on the vessel panel on the left-hand side on the map. There's the transshipment algorithms that Kelly talked about. We've released the new filters of filtering by the last 2 hours. You can access all global EEZs. You can filter by speed and passports. We've made a bunch of vessel list improvements. And what's coming really soon is going to be the risk indicators first release that we just shared with you, and the activity screen, which will centralize the key activity across a bunch of activity. Cool. Kelly, is there anything that you wanted to add to that?
No, I just wanted to respond to the last message in there, but it's a separate issue, which is absolutely fine. If anyone's got any other questions that aren't related to the releases today, feel free to put them in the Q&A. The follow-up to Sai's question was about, it does look like it's probably a faulty AIS device. And so we've got Dave on the call today, and just behind the scenes, he's downloaded the AIS data in Starboard. And looking at that, it does seem like the orientation for the vessel is 511 unknown for the whole time, and it's reporting on exactly the same longitude. So yeah, that suspicion about the fact that the vessel's probably not in that location sounds correct, and that the AIS device is failing to send the right location.
Cool. I think that's all we wanted to cover today, and so we can give you back a few minutes of your life, and we're going to keep doing these fairly frequently to give you updates on the things that have just come out or are just coming out. And as always, thanks very much for everyone that in some cases we've worked closely directly with on features, and other ones who send us questions and queries through the help center in Starboard and over email. All of those discussions are really important for us to inform how we think about building things and how we think about improving Starboard. So yeah, always keep the questions and the comments coming, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Yep.